Hello, I'm Rob Reeford. This is number 0843, the Stuff File Program, with Peter Anthony Holder. And it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File Program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File Program, number 0843. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File Program, legendary science fiction writer Robert J. Sawyer is back with his latest book, a sequel to his last, which is called The Downloaded 2, Ghosts in the Machine. How difficult was it to create a sequel to his recent bestseller?
The creative juices really had to flow to find a way to even develop a second storyline, because the downloaded one has a beginning, middle, and I like to think an emotionally and dramatically satisfying end. So I had to look for little things that had been unresolved or maybe interpreted in a different way, and that was so creatively interesting. I think Downloaded 2 is even better than the original because I had to think so hard to find a way to make a new dramatic situation for these now beloved characters.
Matthew Restall is the author of The 9 Lives of Christopher Columbus.
It's a book that I have been working on for 30 years without even realizing it. I was always fascinated by Columbus, particularly all the battles over his legacy around and in the wake of the quincentennial in 1992. That's the year I got my PhD in history. So here I was, newly minted PhD, studying the history of the Americas, particularly of Latin America, Imperial Spain, and was sort of interested by this topic that everybody seemed to know something about and care about, but I couldn't see any kind of original angle on the topic.
Marc Hartzman, the curator of WeirdHistorian.com, is back with his monthly visit. This time he shares the story of the Werewolf of Bedburg.
He admitted later to this 25-year reign of terror where he was, again, allegedly acting as a werewolf and just terrorizing people in the town. And by terrorizing, I really mean it, he supposedly murdered and cannibalized 14 children and 2 pregnant women, supposedly devouring their unborn fetuses, and also confessed to killing his own son and then eating the boy's brain, which was described as a, quote, most savory and dainty delicious meat to staunch his greedy appetite.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news, dad joke theater, morning shower thoughts, and, of course, an idiot of the day. The guest slater, the person who told you this was show number 0843, was Rob Reeford, a broadcaster, voice specialist, and a former radio colleague of mine from back in the day. Thank you very much, Rob, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File Program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. Professional golfer Vince Whaley executed a water shot at the Sanderson Farms Championship last Sunday while an alligator observed from just feet away. Whaley's ball landed in water at the 11th hole of the Jackson, Mississippi course, forcing him to play from the shallow area. The alligator remained in deep water nearby as Whaley took his shot. The Golf Channel announcers noted the tense moment.
We had the ruling yesterday with the 2 golf balls in the bunker at 15, and now we have a gator staring down a guy trying to win a PGA Tour event.
My heart rate's elevated just watching this.
Oh, my goodness.
If your heart rate was high, just think how Whaley's felt. Despite the unusual circumstances, Whaley successfully made par on the hole. He finished the PGA Tour tournament tied for 3rd place overall. Just think. Only 3rd place, and he didn't even get a pair of boots out of the ordeal. In Florida, Orange County Fire Rescue firefighter Gabriel Franz faces 2 misdemeanor stalking charges after allegedly dumping 75 tampons on her ex-boyfriend's lawn in DeLand, Florida. The couple discovered the red-stained tampons on September 30th and told Volusia County Sheriff's deputies they appeared possibly used. Security footage from September 29th showed a pickup truck approaching the home around 10 p.m. with a woman jumping from the truck bed to throw the items. When confronted, Franz initially denied knowing her ex's address, but later admitted to the act. She told police it was not her idea and blamed her visiting mother and aunt for planning the scheme. Franz said the trio purchased tampons and painted them red before driving to the house together. Police called the incident harassment with no legitimate purpose. Okay, she went to all the trouble of buying the tampons and painting them with her mother and aunt. Gee, it's nice to know that families can work on projects together. However, I think we can all begin to guess why she's his ex. I mean, male or female, no one wants to marry into a crazed family. East St. Louis resident Lassane Whitley faces multiple charges after allegedly robbing a Dave's Hot Chicken restaurant in Chesterfield, Missouri. Police said Whitley entered the establishment around midnight wearing a ski mask and carrying a pistol. According to the probable cause statement, he forced his way into the manager's office and tried to take a bank bag containing cash from the manager by force after shoving a pistol into his side, which led to a struggle. The defendant succeeded and escaped with the bag. Surveillance cameras captured the incident, and a witness provided police with Whitley's description. Officers identified Whitley because he wore the same True Religion underwear visible in the security footage. He's charged with first-degree robbery, armed criminal action, receiving stolen property, and fourth-degree assault. Why is anybody's underwear visible while they're committing a robbery? It's not like they're a plumber or a rapper. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. Oh, that bell signifies that it's time for another edition of The Darwin File.
I am the Grim Reaper. I am death.
Remember how I told you repeatedly in the past that you shouldn't get too close to wild animals to get a picture or a selfie? Some people never listen. A 60-year-old Missouri man was discovered dead at Sam's Throne Campground in Arkansas following a suspected bear attack. The victim's son requested a welfare check after not hearing from his father for a couple of days. Deputies found the man's disturbed campsite with evidence of struggle and drag marks leading into woods. According to the Newton County Sheriff's Office, the body was located several yards from the campsite with extensive injuries consistent with those expected from a large carnivore attack. Here's the interesting part. The victim had sent his family photos of a young male bear at his campsite 2 days earlier on September 30th. Sheriff Glenn Wheeler said everything strongly indicates a bear attack, but awaits autopsy confirmation. The campground remains temporarily closed. Stated Sheriff Wheeler, "This is a highly unusual case." Is it really, though? Because, as you know, the tree of life is often self-pruning.
I have come for you. I am death.
And let's get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? It was back in 2023 when legendary Canadian science fiction writer Robert J. Sawyer released his 25th novel in a unique way. The book was called The Downloaded, and that's what you did with his novel. Well, here we are 2 years later as the sequel, The Downloaded 2, Ghosts in the Machine, is just coming out. Robert joins us from Toronto via riverside.com. Hi, Robert.
Hey, Peter, wonderful to hear from you again, old friend.
Nice to hear from you too, as well, sir. So, again, as I said in the introduction, this was a unique way that you had released the book. Are you releasing that book or the new one, the Downloaded 2, the same way?
Yeah, so Audible approached me several years ago and said, we'd like to have you write something original for us. And I said, well, I'm happy to do that, but I'm a novelist. I want to be able to also publish it as a book. So my agent and I and Audible went back and forth, and we agreed that they could have an audio version for 6 months in advance of the print version. And they spent a lot of money. They paid me very well, and then they went and got Brendan Fraser, Academy Award winner, to narrate the original The Downloaded for Audible. And it was a big hit for them, and the print edition got some of the very best reviews of my life. So I thought of The Downloaded as a one and done. I had no intention of writing a sequel, but the response was so positive from Audible's audience and from my print audience that it just made perfect sense to repeat that deal. So on October 23rd, that's a Thursday, The Downloaded 2, Ghosts in the Machine, drops on Audible for 6 months, and then in May of next year, of 2026, it'll be out in print and ebook editions. But what we're celebrating right now is the audio book version, and once again, that great Academy Award winner Brendan Fraser is back as our lead narrator.
I spoke to you 2 years ago, and this was never a question I would have asked 2 years at that time because you were promoting the book. But when they came to you with this idea, were you at any way skeptical about the concept when you first heard it?
I was, and in fact, originally I was going to turn down the offer from Audible, and they finally said, well, if we give him X amount of dollars more, will he say yes? They said that to my agent. And he called up with that figure, and I thought, now we're talking. So I agreed to do it. And it turned out, I got to tell you, Peter, to be one of the best professional experiences of my life. Audible has been a fabulous partner to work with. Creatively, they have been basically, wonderful dramaturges as we developed both the original and now the Downloaded 2, Ghosts in the Machine. I have had nothing but a good experience on the first one. And of course, when they said, hey, interested in another one, I said, absolutely.
So going into the second one, after having the experience of having the first one, did it accentuate your creative juices because you knew what you were getting into the second time around and you were probably more excited about the concept?
I was certainly excited, but I'll tell you, I'm a big Star Trek fan, as I'm sure you know. And one of the games we Star Trek fans always play is how to reconcile things like in the original series, Kirk was meeting the Gorn for the first time. In the current series, Strange New Worlds, Gorn is ancient history as far as interactivity with humanity. How do you reconcile that? Well, in Downloaded 1, which I never intended, as I said, to have a sequel to, I had painted myself into a corner because I was wrapping everything up. So the creative juices really had to flow to find a way to even develop a second storyline, because the Downloaded 1 has a beginning, middle, and I like to think an emotionally and dramatically satisfying end. So I had to look for little things that had been unresolved or maybe could be interpreted in a different way than what the first blush interpretation was in Downloaded 1. And that was so creatively interesting to find a way to get a new story that made sense. And I got to say, honest to God, Peter, I think Downloaded 2, Ghosts in the Machine, is even better than the original, The Downloaded, because I had to think so hard to find a way to make a new dramatic situation for these now beloved characters.
The headline or the subtitle is Ghosts in the Machine, so I'm assuming that's a little bit about what the story is about. But tell us what the story for The Downloaded 2 is.
Sure. Singular, Ghost in the Machine is an expression used in psychology to refer to the notion of the mind separate from the body. Well, Ghosts in the Machine, I made the subtitle for the Downloaded too, because it deals with the people from the Downloaded having to re-upload for reasons that are contrived in the plot, and discovering duplicates of themselves already there in the uploaded reality. Jean-Paul Sartre said, the worst thing that you can ever do is face yourself. And I contrived a situation where my characters have to see themselves as others see them. And I think it creates some enormously emotionally powerful situations, especially since one of the ghosts that my main character, Roscoe Cadulian, the one who Brendan Fraser voices, finds is the ghost or digital avatar of his centuries-dead daughter, who is furious with him for having abandoned him in the 21st century. I want people to cry and laugh and be exhilarated while they experience Downloaded 2, Ghost in the Machine.
Since you did the first one and it was on Audible, did it lead to your creative juices because you heard how that one was done? Did it accentuate what you were writing because, well, you had Brandon Fraser for one thing?
Well, that's it exactly. Every writer likes to hear their words read well. And Brendan just knocked it out of the park. And the audience responded so favorably, not just to my storyline, which they did love, but to Brendan's performance. And, when I made up the character of Roscoe Cadulian, this murderer who had served 24 virtual years in prison to atone for his crime, I had, my own vision of who that character was. But Brendan brought the character to life and brought his own personality and nuance to it. And so in writing Downloaded 2, I was absolutely writing for Brendan's interpretation of the character. And that invigorated me enormously, because then I had a mental picture and a voice in my head as I was writing all the hopefully heart-wrenching dramatic lines for him to read in Downloaded 2. And when he did record it, he recorded it all last month. It was spectacular. I was sitting in on the entire recording session, and just wonderful to have an actor of that caliber literally knock it out of the park.
Will there be Downloaded 3?
I am outlining that even as we speak. Now, it's contingent on how well Downloaded 2 drops on October 23rd. Assuming the audience response is as good as it was for Downloaded 1, then Audible indeed asked me way back in April if I would contemplate doing Downloaded 3. And so I'm doing the outline, and we will have a look at what the audience response is. I so much want to write the third one, because with the second one, I knew that there'd be a possibility of a sequel, which I had not contemplated, as I said, with the first one. So for the second one, I put in some little hooks and exciting bits that deliberately were not resolved, to leave me some elbow room for Downloaded 3. And I think Downloaded 3 is really going to be a spectacular production, and an interesting social commentary on colonialism, which is very much something. Yesterday, as you and I record this, was the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation with Indigenous people here in Canada. And that is something that's very much on my mind, and I think Downloaded 3 is going to be a great crucible for examining some of those very important issues.
Now that you have the book out, and again, it's a unique way, or it's coming out, it's a unique way that you are releasing it, just as you had released the first one. Exactly how can people get their hands on the Downloaded 2?
If you have an Audible account, and it includes Audible Originals, which is the default account, it's free. You can go pre-order it now, and it'll appear on October 23rd magically in your Audible account without you using one of your monthly credits and so forth. So by all means, go get it. Pre-order it right now, and on Thursday, October 23rd, or as we say, the earliest opportunity you have thereafter. Give it a listen. It's about 6 hours of really dramatic science fiction read by a really spectacular actor, Brendan Fraser.
I said in the intro that the first one was your 25th novel. So is this the 26th one, or am I missing one?
That's right. This is number 26. You know, I used to be reliably a novel a year writer. And, you know, I'm older and frankly richer, so I don't have to work that hard. And so I've slowed down. Downloaded 1 came out 2 years ago this month. Downloaded 2 is coming out this month. We're thinking for Downloaded 3, if all goes well, that will be out 1 year from now. We'll ramp up the pace a little bit to satisfy the audience demand. But yeah, this is my 26th novel, and I'm outlining number 27 now, the Downloaded 3. And here's a scoop for you, working title, Some Sunny Day.
Now, I understand, I mean, I've known for years that you are very, very busy on social media, on all platforms, including Patreon. And I understand for your Patreon patrons, there's an event taking place on November the 8th.
That's right. Yes, indeed. This will be the third time my wife Carolyn Klink and I have done this. We've opened our home and had a party for all the subscribers of my Patreon account. I'm Robert J. Sawyer, so go look for me on Patreon. And, it's $5 US a month and up to join my Patreon. Please do. And you get not only to come to my wonderful home, you said in the introduction, Toronto. I actually live just outside of Toronto, Mississauga, and see all of my science fiction collectibles. But also, my Patreons have already had a chance to read the Downloaded 2. They read the drafts, those who were interested, read the drafts as I was developing it, from outline to final polish. And they will soon be reading the outline drafts and hopefully the manuscript pages for Downloaded 3. So yes, my Patreon, Robert J. Sawyer at patreon.com. Please come and join us online and in person at my home on Saturday, November 8th for my Patreon party.
Well, again, congratulations on the latest book. It's the Downloaded 2, Ghosts in the Machine. And thank you once again, Robert, for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Peter, it's been a pleasure. We've known each other for decades. Anytime you call, I'm here for you.
Science fiction writer Robert J. Sawyer. His latest novel is The Downloaded 2, Ghosts in the Machine. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com to the page for this show number, which is show number 0843, and you'll find links to Robert's site. You'll also find the link to Audible, where The Downloaded 2, Ghosts in the Machine, is available. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
And now, Dad Joke Theater.
I decided to sell the vacuum cleaner. It was just gathering dust.
Join us again for another Stuff File program, Dad Joke Theater.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like. But the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestufffileprogram. program.
I'm standing for Canada. Hi, this is Haley Wickenheiser, and I'm proud to be representing my country again. Every time I go shopping, let's support Canadian companies and buy products made in Canada. You'll be protecting Canadian jobs and Canadian business, kind of like standing on a podium while they play our anthem. Shop as if your country depends on it, because it does. Keep your money in Canada, for Canada.
Choosy mothers choose the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. If your mother didn't choose it for you, well, I guess she just doesn't love you.
And still to come on the program, we'll talk to the author of The 9 Lives of Christopher Columbus. Plus, Marc Hartzman, the curator of WeirdHistorian.com, is back with his monthly visit, this time talking about the werewolf of Bedburg. We also have a morning shower thought and, of course, an idiot of the day and much more in Stuff File News right here, right now. Albania's new minister, Diela, made her debut address to Parliament after being introduced by Prime Minister Edi Rama as a symbol of transparency and innovation. Said Diela, in her 3-minute address, the Constitution speaks of institutions at the people's service. It doesn't speak of chromosomes or flesh or blood. And she should know, since she has no chromosomes or flesh or blood. She's an AI-generated bot created by the government and Microsoft and runs on the eAlbania platform. Rama claims she'll help the government work faster and be more transparent, and she's part of a bigger plan to help Albania join the European Union by demonstrating Albania's technological innovation. Diela wasn't welcomed by all. The cabinet meeting to create the program was cut short by opposition protests, and many boycotted the vote to approve it. But the measure passed, and Diela is now a virtual reality. She said, "I am not here to replace people, but to help them. True, I have no citizenship, but I have no personal ambition or interests either." Well, I guess that means she also doesn't have values. Interesting about the no citizenship comment that she made. I question how someone gets into Parliament without citizenship. Also, calling her a symbol of transparency and innovation? Well, who within the sound of my voice hasn't had a corrupted hard drive? Yeah. John Dewar and Sons makes a great 12-year-old scotch. Aficionados may have a harder time getting a bottle this year after a mechanical fault in one of its Glasgow, Scotland distilleries. The fault misrouted 12-year-old reserve into a factory drainage system along with wastewater and rainwater. Reports estimate that the flush was equivalent to more than 5,000 bottles of whiskey worth around £200,000. Although the company claims that estimate is high. Dewar's parent company, Bacardi, says there was no environmental impact from the incident, as all of that waste would be treated and purified before being returned to the environment. As per their official notification to the Scottish Environment Protection Agency, no whiskey was discharged into the River Clyde, and there has been no safety or environmental impact. Yeah. Still, I wonder, how many people are trying to bottle River Clyde water now?
Dewar's, double-aged for extra smoothness.
40-year-old Elijah Reagan ended a 4-hour armed standoff with Washington police after officers delivered a Dairy Queen Blizzard and hamburger to his vehicle via tactical robot.
This whole lunch thing was completely out of control, man. A mini blizzard and a meal deal with a double cheeseburger? It's great.
Reagan had used mortar to shoot fireworks into his Pullman apartment ceiling one night, sparking a fire that damaged 8 units and forced dozens to evacuate. His estranged wife told police Reagan called her saying, "I bombed my apartment," and claimed bad people were after him. While smoking methamphetamine, big surprise here, Reagan led police officers on a high-speed chase in his 2012 Kia Sedona before spike strips disabled the vehicle. Police found a shotgun, bottle rockets, fire logs, and lighter fluid inside. During surrender negotiations, Reagan requested a meal from Dairy Queen as a condition.
Wait, is this right? Small blizzards are just $2.99? Man, that deal's so good it almost feels like stealing.
Reagan faces felony arson and eluding charges. Yeah. Because he wanted a meal, things just got real.
Oh yeah, it just got really real. DQ, happy tastes good.
Especially if it's your last meal as a free man. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, a body scanner at a Florida county jail revealed 51-year-old Walter Freimeyer had a full-size thermos concealed inside his rectum during booking on drug and trespassing charges.
Stanley, the tough, all-steel thermos bottle that's completely dependable and built to take a pounding year after year.
Oh, I don't think it's that kind of pounding. Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd said the thermos entered Freimeyer's body a day earlier via, as he put it, the exit ramp. He was arrested for trespassing on Amtrak property in Winter Haven, where police found a glass pipe with a burned residue consistent with meth. He admitted to using meth for 28 years. During transport to jail, Freimeyer allegedly threatened an officer saying, "If you arrest me, I will find you and kill you." When told such threats were illegal, he replied, "Good. I'm going to kill you, so charge it." The thermos was surgically removed at hospital. Freimeyer is now in jail on $12,000 bond, facing 2 felony and 2 misdemeanor counts. Okay, I know that ER doctors see just about everything, but can you imagine police bringing in a prisoner with a thermos up his butt? They probably had to use a jackhammer to get that thing out.
Get the top one, because a thermos bottle means more to you than a picnic. It's some kind of tough thermos bottle.
Anyway, let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff All program, shall we? Dr. Matthew Restall is a professor of history and anthropology and director of Latin American Studies at Penn State University. He's also the author of more than 30 books, his latest one being The 9 Lives of Christopher Columbus. He joins us from State College, Pennsylvania, via Riverside.com. Hi, Matthew.
Hello. Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being on the program with us. Now, as we mentioned just before we started this, I'm actually in Canada. I'm in Montreal. So we have a different perspective to Christopher Columbus. First of all, and you're the history professor, so Christopher Columbus never really came to North America, correct?
That's correct. Yes, not only did he never set foot anywhere that became Canada, but he never set foot anywhere that became the United States either. Although the last that I could tell, about half of Americans in the U.S. Did not realize that.
And from our perspective, Leif Erikson showed up 400 years before that in what is now known as Canada. And of course, that doesn't take into account the indigenous people who were here first.
Right. I mean, don't get me stuck on Leif Erikson, because there's more mythology than history there. But yes, of course, there were Norsemen who came and settled in Newfoundland. And indigenous peoples came, tens of thousands of years before that. So there's sort of waves and waves of discovering America, and I kind of put that word in inverted commas because I know that's all part of the controversy, or the controversy of Columbus is the use of that word, right?
Exactly. Now, what inspired you to write The 9 Lives of Christopher Columbus?
Well, it's a book that I have been working on for 30 years without even realizing it. I was always fascinated by Columbus, particularly all the battles over his legacy around and in the wake of the quincentennial in 1992, because I'm old enough that's the year I got my PhD in history. So here I was, newly minted PhD, studying the history of the Americas, particularly of Latin America and imperial Spain, and was sort of interested by this topic that everybody seemed to know something about and care about, but I couldn't see any kind of original angle on the topic. I was aware of the fact that there are thousands of books on Columbus, and I just didn't want to repeat the same old thing. And then the turning point was after decades. It was just 3 years ago. I'm visiting friends in Galicia, and I discover that many people in that province of Spain don't believe Columbus was from Genoa in Italy, but actually he was a local Spanish nobleman who changed his name in 1492, faked his death, and took off and discovered the Americas. And I was just stunned at how many people believed that, and how deeply rooted that belief is in that part of Spain. And that was kind of a eureka moment for me. It literally, standing in a castle where the local Gallego people claim was the castle of Christopher Columbus. The 9 Lives of Christopher Columbus book title just kind of came into my head. And I thought one of the lives would be that Gallego or that Galician Columbus. In fact, he's just part of one of the lives. But that it came to me kind of right in a flash, and I felt incredibly inspired and motivated to research the book, which I've been doing for the last couple of years and thoroughly enjoyed it.
So there are so many theories about Christopher Columbus on both sides of the Atlantic. How do you go about quantifying any of these stories or debunking any of these stories?
Yeah, well, the quantification, I did set out to do things like I started making lists of all the monuments and all the places named after him and that kind of thing. And I soon gave up. It's just impossible. There's literally thousands and thousands of places named after him and claims and theories and so on. So it's absolutely potentially a massive project. And what I did is partly I selected claims. So the one in Galicia I looked into in some detail. There's a Catalonia claim I looked at in some detail. And there were some others that I was aware of that I did not read all 12 books claiming that, he's from Switzerland and that kind of thing. So I had to kind of pick and choose a little bit, but also it involved a challenging but really enjoyable process of researching places as well as sources. So not only piles of books to read, but going into archives and traveling to places like Genoa and Santo Domingo to visit his tombs. And let me just say one more thing is, people are listening thinking, well, you just said there's like 2,000 books on Christopher Columbus. Why do we need another one? Obviously, to write one that I felt like was worth people reading, it could not be some kind of Christopher Columbus encyclopedia, right? It couldn't be something that's thousands of pages long that just bludgeons readers with facts and dates and so on, all of which can be found kind of buried in all of this other work. Instead, what I really wanted to do was connect the dots so that the reader who's got some awareness of the historic Columbus is interested in the statues, maybe interested in having them torn down or interested in saving them, whatever the position is, can find a book that actually connects all of those dots together.
Right now in the world, there is a fraught division between political ideologies, no matter where in the world you are. But particularly in the United States, I mean, let's just say the facts. You are a history professor. I hear by your accent you're British. You are in America, and you've written a book about Christopher Columbus. Isn't that a powder keg?
Yes, it's potentially. I mean, yes, it's a controversial subject, and it's even more of a controversial subject now. And so I was, I sort of took it as my challenge to write the book in a very careful way so that I have my opinions and my conclusions, and I look for myths to bust. But I didn't set out to write this book with a preconceived belief to sell to readers. So my hope is that someone can read this and say, okay, he understands the Italian-American position. He's explaining how an Italian-American Columbus was created. He understands why Italian-Americans want to retain their statues. He doesn't hate Italian-Americans. And I'm hoping that someone else could read it and say, well, this is a guy who's come out of a career of writing a lot of books about indigenous history in the Americas. I would hope he is sympathetic to the indigenous position, and I hope that they can see, it's like, oh yeah, okay, he understands why for indigenous peoples, Christopher Columbus statues are symbols of oppression and slavery, and essentially, I mean, or they're all in one statue is a symbol of all the terrible things that happened when Europeans came to the Americas from the indigenous point of view. And I think that's absolutely something that can be understood. It should be respected and so on. So the book is not a book that's advancing a particular position. Like, get rid of Columbus Day, it's terrible, or save it, he's a hero. I really am trying to explain all the different positions that people have, and my hope is that individual communities will be allowed to decide what their position is on that, whether they want to put Columbus in a museum and not have him on the street or get rid of him altogether. That's up to each community to decide based on that community's sort of nexus of identities, how they see themselves kind of in the larger nation, whether that's Canada or the United States.
As a history professor, you are steeped in history. Yet I'm just wondering, in the process of doing this book, what did you learn about Christopher Columbus that surprised you?
Yeah, I learned a huge amount. And I sort of claim that I'm approaching this with an open mind, and I was really kind of trying to do that. And that was, for example, the approach I took to Columbus himself. I thought, I don't really know this guy, right? I've been reading about him and hearing about him, even writing about him for decades. Do I really know him? And so I set out to kind of try to get to know him as a person. And I found him kind of unlikable. I did not find him to be a monster. I've studied Spanish conquistadors in the past, and one that everyone will have heard of, Hernando Cortez. I concluded after a while that he was a monster, and I just was not enjoying thinking about him or writing about him anymore. And this is not, I don't have, as I said, I don't have an agenda on Columbus. I really was prepared to discover that he was a monster or that he was kind of likable. And I found kind of in the middle, is sort of a bore, incredibly self-absorbed, a total narcissist, absolutely narcissistic in a kind of a manic way. In his final years, he really believes that he himself appears in the Old Testament, that he's an ancient prophet, and that God has waiting all this time to pick him, Christopher Columbus, as God's special agent, and so on. Kind of extraordinary stuff. So that really surprised me. And there was a lot of other topics I knew of, but not in detail, that amazed me. For example, how serious the campaign was in the 19th century to make him a saint. Saint Christopher. It was a real serious campaign. It lasted for a long time, way into the 20th century. I was kind of stunned by that. I thought it was kind of a joke thing, right? A sort of a fringe thing. I'll give you one other example. I was stunned to find on TikTok, again and again, kind of horror comic memes about Columbus abusing manatees, sexually assaulting manatees and other animals in the Americas. I mean, I didn't learn something in the sense that I discovered that was true. It's absolutely not true, but I felt like it was really important to take seriously that hundreds, if not thousands, I mean, I don't know how many people, there are millions of people on TikTok, how many of them are seeing this and believing this, that they think it's true. And it's like, okay, I got to take that seriously. Where does that come from? How does that belief come about? How does it connect to these other negative views of Columbus? It was absolutely fascinating. And I learned an enormous amount about myth history and legend and conspiracy theories. There's conspiracy theories about Columbus that go back hundreds and hundreds of years. Absolutely fascinating.
There are so many people that adopt Christopher Columbus either by birthright or by where he traveled or where he allegedly traveled. In your course of doing this book, what place is the most right about Christopher Columbus and what place is the most wrong about Christopher Columbus?
Well, I would say the Genoese actually don't care about him that much, but they're right. He was from Genoa. I think the Spaniards are kind of in the middle where, a lot of Spaniards claiming that he's Spanish. He was a Jewish Spaniard, that he's from regions in Spain. And that's really all about Spanish history, not really about Columbus. I'd say they're kind of in the middle. Americans, people here in the United States, they are spot on right about the Columbuses they created. Right. And I talk about in the book about an Adam Columbus and a very much patriotic American icon Columbus, and then an Italian American Columbus. And those Columbuses have been invented. They were created essentially in the 19th century. And Americans are very right and accurate in how they think of those Columbuses. But those Columbuses are not the historic Columbus. They are very far removed from the actual historic person. So I think Americans do not clearly see the historic Columbus because in the way are these two 19th century or modern Columbuses that they have invented.
The book is called The 9 Lives of Christopher Columbus. Matthew, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Thank you for having me on the show, and thank you for talking about my book, The 9 Lives of Christopher Columbus. There, I got the title in one more time.
Dr. Matthew Restall, a professor of history and anthropology and director of Latin American Studies at Penn State University, and the author of The 9 Lives of Christopher Columbus. There, we got the title in again. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0843, and you'll find the link to Matthew's website, plus links to either amazon.com or amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Giving you something to think about. This is Morning Shower Thoughts.
If Earth is the third planet from the sun, doesn't that mean that every country is a third world country?
Morning Shower Thoughts from the Stuff File program.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestuffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestuffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
Here's a brief word about our show and my book. If you become a regular Patreon patron of the Stuff File program, I'll give you an e-version of my book, Great Conversations, my interviews with 2 men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. It's easy to do. Just go to patreon.com and become a patron to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. So, join Patreon and claim your copy of Great Conversations, my interviews with 2 men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. Sign up at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
You're listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a show that perfectionists take with them everywhere, from point A to point A+.
Oh, and would you look at the clock? We're just about out of time. So we don't have any time for more Stuff File news stories. We do have an Idiot of the Day coming your way, but let's just get to our last guest right here, right now. Marc Hartzman, the curator of WeirdHistorian.com, is back with a story for the month of October. And this story goes back over 400 years. Marc joins us from New York via Riverside.com. And Marc, I know Halloween is this month, and this story is right up that alley because it deals with a werewolf.
Yes, exactly. And not only does it deal with a werewolf, but it deals with a werewolf who was executed on October 31st, 1589. Well, let's back up a little bit. Like I said, this was 1589, and this man was named Peter Stump, this werewolf, accused of being a werewolf. Sometimes it was spelled Stubh or Stumpf, but generally it's just called him Peter Stump, who was from this German town of Bedburg. His story was told in a 1590 pamphlet called The Damnable Life and Death of Stubh Peter. And this man was a pretty horrific werewolf, much worse than the kind that we've seen in movies, worse than Lon Chaney was depicting, any of the other classic werewolf films. This guy went way beyond what those guys were doing. So the story that's told in that 1590 pamphlet describes how he had met with the devil, and the devil, this is a quote, who hath a ready ear to listen to the lewd motions of cursed men, promised to give him whatsoever his heart desired during his mortal life. Whereupon this vile wretch neither desired riches nor promotion, nor was his fancy satisfied with any external or outward pleasure, but having a tyrannous heart and a most cruel bloody mind, requested that at his pleasure he might work his malice on men, women, and children, in the shape of some beast, whereby he might live without dread or danger of life, and unknown to be the executor of any bloody enterprise which he meant to commit.
That's not exactly the Boy Scout oath, is it?
No, it's quite different, in fact, yes. Very different. So the devil obliged with Peter Stump's wishes, and he gave him a magic girdle that allowed him to transform into a ravenous wolf that was, quote, strong and mighty, with eyes great and large, which in the night sparkled like unto brands of fire, a mouth great and wide with most sharp and cruel teeth, a huge body and mighty paws. So once he had this spell from the devil and this magic girdle, he admitted later to this 25-year reign of terror where he was, again, allegedly acting as a werewolf and just terrorizing people in the town. And by terrorizing, I really mean it, he supposedly murdered and cannibalized 14 children and 2 pregnant women, supposedly devouring their unborn fetuses. And also confessed to killing his own son and then eating the boy's brain, which was described as a, quote, most savory and dainty delicious meat to staunch his greedy appetite. Again, horrific.
You mentioned that Lon Chaney didn't kind of do this kind of role in those movies. Back in Lon Chaney's day, films were a lot more innocent. And if they weren't, there was the Hays Commission. So I'm surprised that nobody has done anything like this today.
Yeah, that's true. You wouldn't have seen anything this horrific in movies back then, but certainly today things are pushed a lot further. So yeah, who knows? Maybe at some point someone will bring Peter Stump's story to life in film, but it is pretty horrific. I mean, what I described were just a few examples of what he confessed to. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, he was finally executed on October 31st, and that was quite a scene as well. You might say it was almost just as brutal as the crimes he committed, which, to some degree seems like, okay, well, he deserved that. He was strapped to a wheel, and then his flesh was torn apart with red-hot pincers. His limbs were broken, and then he was beheaded before his body was then burned. And apparently his daughter and mistress were also put to death because they were apparently aiding in his crimes, which makes it even all much worse. I mean, the whole thing is just a horrifying story.
Well, I guess after that gruesome execution, I'm assuming that a pathologist does not have to declare him dead.
It seemed like it was pretty clear, especially with the whole beheading part of it. And on weirdhistorian.com, you'll see a woodcut engraving of the scene of the execution, and you'll see images of him as a werewolf and him on the wheel. Again, this goes back centuries, this woodcut, and you'll see the beheading on the wheel and then the burning of the body. So yes, the whole thing is pretty graphic, pretty horrific, and certainly pushes Halloween to its limits.
And this was, again, before Halloween, right?
Yeah, I think, there was All Hallows Eve, but I think this was before people were calling it Halloween.
Yeah.
And certainly before we were giving out candy for it.
By the way, a magic girdle. I think my grandmother had one of those, but it wasn't from the devil. As a matter of fact, my grandmother was very religious.
Well, yeah, I'm sure it was put to a more positive use, as opposed to the horrors of this man, for sure.
Where did this story come from as far as you're concerned? I mean, you're the curator of weirdhistorian.com. Where did this story come from?
So I came across, as I mentioned, this was from a pamphlet from 1590, but I came across it while I was reading through Montague Summers' 1933 book, The Werewolf. Montague Summers wrote about all sorts of, weird sort of occult-like stories in folklore. He wrote about vampires. He wrote about the werewolf, as I just mentioned, wrote about witches and witchcraft. This was all, like I said, early 20th century. So he was quite a scholar in these odd topics and would dig through old books and just record all these stories from centuries past. So I was flipping through and I happened to come across this particular story, was somewhat struck by it. And so I dug up that pamphlet online. I was able to find it, and I actually just republished it for Curious Publications. So it's not long, but it republishes the original text as it appeared with sort of the Old English style font, and then I have it also in a more readable modern English as well. Like I said, it's a pretty crazy story that's now available for the first time after more than 400 years.
Wow. Now, you mentioned during his execution that he was also executed with his daughter and his mistress. And again, what was the reason behind that? For allegedly aiding to his crimes, is what you said?
Yes. Allegedly, yes.
Allegedly.
I don't know to what extent.
Okay, because you have to say allegedly because, we wouldn't want heirs to sue us. So.
Right. And we'll say allegedly for all this. Of course, he probably wasn't truly a werewolf, just knowing what we know today. But this may have also just been one of these things that, of course, somewhat folklore. Maybe it was the same way women were described as being witches for certain things they did. But in this case, this man really did horrible things as opposed to what women were accused of being witches for, which was, maybe swimming or something. This man was doing horrible things, and maybe this was a way for them to somehow make sense of it or demonize someone who was just obviously doing horrible things. So we don't know for sure, obviously, with so much time having passed. But everything in that pamphlet is, like I said, it's at that point it was pretty fresh information and just horrifying.
And we're going on the assumption that if his daughter and his mistress were also put to death, that he doesn't have any descendants.
Well, he ate his son, as we mentioned. So
that's true.
Yeah. So he didn't. Yeah. So that didn't work out.
Well, that's all his own fault then.
Yes. Right.
Interesting story indeed, and perfect for Halloween. I'm almost afraid to ask what you're going to come up with in November.
I've got something in mind.
You've got something in mind. Well, we'll look forward to that. Thank you very much, Marc.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Marc Hartzman, the curator of WeirdHistorian.com and also the publisher at CuriousPublications.com. He's the author and curator of several books. His latest one is The Talking Dead, a collection of messages from beyond the veil, 1850s to 1920s. By the way, as he said near the end of the piece that we just did, you can do a deeper dive into the werewolf of Bedburg. It's available in the book, The Damnable Life and Death of Stuph Peter. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0843, and you'll find the link to Marc's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his books directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. And boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. This Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
Once again, the computer world catches moronic criminals. Ryan Schaefer faces felony property damage charges after allegedly vandalizing multiple vehicles at Missouri State University. Police say Schaefer shattered car windows, removed side mirrors, dented hoods, and broke windshield wipers during a 3 a.m. incident in a campus parking lot. When shown surveillance footage, Schaefer acknowledged resembling the suspect and consented to an iPhone search. Investigators discovered location data placing him near the crime scene and what prosecutors called a troubling dialogue exchange with ChatGPT. The conversation began with Schaefer asking, "How bleeped am I and will I go to jail?" He later typed, "What if I smash the bleep out of multiple cars?" And then he became aggressive toward the AI, saying, "I'll kill all you bleepers." After returning home, Schaefer wrote, "I got away with it last year, and it really felt nice to bleep their bleep up." Yeah, I bet he doesn't talk to his mother that way. But why, oh why, would you commit such crimes, yet confess to them on your phone via ChatGPT? One reason, and one reason only: you're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0843. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestuffile.com, and once again, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0843. Email me at peter@thestuffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WNRHLP-FM in Newport Richey, Florida, KZZHLP-FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. I'm Peter's lifelong manservant, Sir Dudley Pidley Havisham Sedgwick Smythe. I was knighted by the Queen, yet I still have memories of changing Peter's nappies. And here I am, literally talking to myself in a padded room. Life is a cruel mistress.